A pleasant good evening to all of you. I want to start by saying to you that when I was 11 years old, in the first form of the secondary school that I attended, I was compelled to do a class that I absolutely detested. It was called public speaking. I hated every aspect of the experience. There was a master, we called them masters then, teacher, by the name, he's now of blessed memory, by the name of Gordon O. Bell. And he said to me, "Young Simmons, you need to understand that one day you will be forced or called upon to introduce a very important person. And there is a distinction that has to be drawn when you're introducing important people. A person who is important by virtue of being popular and well-liked has to be introduced in a different way to a person who is important because of the fact that he is well-established and expert and well-accomplished. And the two must never meet." And at 11 years old, I nodded and I imbibed, and I've carried that information with me, clasped to my breast, for over 40 years since. And now tonight, for my sins, I finally have an opportunity to introduce an important person. But it turns out that the information given to me by Mr. Bell is utterly useless because he is important, because he is popular, and also because he is substantially accomplished. So the alternative left to me, ladies and gentlemen, would at first blush have been simply to say, well, the speaker really needs no introduction. But every aspect of this gentleman's life cries out, I want to submit for introduction. It cries out for inspection by this party. And if I could sum up his life in one phrase, it would be that he has demonstrated the courage of his convictions. And I think that I want to commend that phrase, courage of your convictions, to this political party at this time. And I do so because there are far too many around the world who have chosen the path of least resistance while in leadership positions around the world. There are far too many who have forgotten the words of Dr. Martin Luther King when he says that the measure of a man is not where he stands in his moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and adversity. And courage of conviction is what our guest speaker has demonstrated at all times. You may ask me, we'll give an example of the courage of conviction. I would first of all go to the teenage years when I was reading the newspapers and avariciously imbibing all that would have been written by an audacious and very intellectual, and I thought quite brash, young university lecturer who was giving the then leader of the country, and I suspect just for transparency purposes, I should remind you, then leader of this party, a lot of trouble. And perhaps he was too brash, perhaps he was too direct. I am told by those who were close to him that he may have applied a little bit too much pressure on certain fronts of key interest to the then leader of the land. But for all that he did, he was rewarded by the dubious, in my view at the time, dubious return of having his work, his permission to work and remain here revoked. And there is, I believe, in all of us, a sense of understanding that confronted with those circumstances, many people would wilt. Many people will feel that this is the beginning of the end. Not so for Comrade Ralph. Not so for Uncle Ralph, as he's affectionately known. It seemed to buoy him. It seemed to fortify him. Quite frankly, there are those who believe that it seemed to catapult him into starting a political career of his own. And I think that all of us in Barbados feel now a certain sense of vindication on his behalf, that he who was once commanded by the Royal Barbados Police Force to leave Barbados has returned as an installed Prime Minister and was saluted by officers of the same Royal Barbados Police Force on his return to Barbados. Courage of his conviction. And there are obviously many, many, many ways in which this was demonstrated through his remarkable political career and his leadership exploits, both at home, in this region, and internationally. And it would be most inappropriate for me to try to go into too many of them here tonight. But I want to leave one with you because it stands out in my mind as part of the demonstration of courage, of conviction in times of adversity. And it turns on the story that is told about Argyle International Airport in St. Vincent and the hospital being built in St. Vincent and the use of Cuban labor on that little island. And the fact that Cuban labor of specialist skill was deployed in St. Vincent incurred the wrath of persons in the United States Senate. Powerful United States senators like Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Tim Scott, all of whom, a triad, all of whom have demonstrated their interest to occupy the seat of the presidency. And they united, they came together, they created a piece of legislation which was designed to punish any states that utilize Cuban labor. The legislation was designed to punish any state that utilized Cuban medical brigades. Imagine, if you will, the difficulty of being a prime minister in a tiny island nestled in the Lesser Antilles that is only about 30 kilometers long, with no resources of substance to call its own. But you have the power of the United States Senate being rallied against you by legislation on the floor of the Congress. For many leaders around the world, it would be time to retreat. Not so for Ralph Gonsalves. Not so for Prime Minister Gonsalves. And I say again, it is a study of courage in conviction. And so therefore, I believe, quite frankly, that I could say, it is part of that courage of conviction that caused him to be successful when he went to the polls for the first time in 1994. It was in that same year that I'm sure his courage of conviction caused him to be elected as the deputy leader of his party. And within 4 years, he became the leader of the Unity Labour Party. And in every successive election since that time, five elections, he has come away successful and victorious. Ladies and gentlemen, the study of his life has been a courage of his conviction and a conviction of a love for labor. And his gift to politics in this region has been a labor of love. I want you to stand and welcome to this podium the father now of the West Indian civilization, the elder statesman, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves.
Comrade Chairman, Comrade Sister Mia, comrades and friends of the Barbados Labour Party, warriors of labor. I want first of all to thank Mia for this kind, and I was going to say fraternal because that's easy off the tongue, but this sisterly invitation. And I'm very happy to be here this evening. I know we have a long program, and some of you would have gathered here a little earlier, and you may be saying, I wonder if Ralph is going to deliver one of those speeches like Fidel and Chavez and have us till 4 in the morning. Fear not. "28 years ago, on October the 16th, a young woman in the Parliament of Barbados, Mia Amor Motley, accepted my invitation to attend the inaugural convention of the Unity Labour Party 28 years ago. She was a young godmother to the ULP, a godmother nevertheless, and she has been a good godmother. I know that because of the changing scenes of life, the vicissitudes in our life and living, that from time to time, over the period since I have been a political activist, which this year is 54 years. It has been my life. How I have come to endure that long period. What initiated it, I know not. Those who write these things may sometime in the future try to figure out. 54 years is not 54 weeks. And during that time, there have been ups and downs, but always that any time as a man of labor that I have had a setback, it was always my determination to turn that setback into an advance. Indeed, that is the history of the labor movement in our Caribbean and elsewhere. The Barbados Labour Party and the Unity Labour Party, apart from Mia being a young godmother, the founding of the Unity Labour Party, the genesis of this great party, the Unity Labour Party, and we have been in existence for 28 years, and we have been in government for almost 22 of those years, and it has been my honor to to have been the Prime Minister for that entire period. But the components of our great party were principally the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Labour Party and the Movement for National Unity. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Labour Party, since the days of Grantley Adams, our party and the Barbados Labour Party have been very close. Indeed, there were very close relations, strong relations between Comrade Grantley and the Cato family. Dr. Arnott Cato, who became President of the Senate under the leadership of my friend and comrade Tom Adams, and Arnott Cato was the brother of Robert Milton Cato, who was the founder of the Labour Party and the first Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Labour Party and the Barbados Labour Party were part and parcel of the West Indies Federal Labour Party during the time of the West Indian Federation. It doesn't matter how you twist it, how you toss it, how you spin it. Labour in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Labour in Barbados, they have made extraordinary contributions to the development of their respective countries and to our Caribbean civilization. Some leaders of the party, of each of the parties, have done more than others, but over the full extent of the history that each of these parties, and also the West Indies Federal Labour Party, they have been devoted to uplifting the common man, to improving the condition of the poor and the working people, and to build democratic institutions in a way, in a manner that our respective countries are being seen as very successful stories in a world of great turmoil. And the record of Grantley and of Tom, and Tom did a lot of great work for the people of Barbados. The fact that he was responsible for creating some temporary difficulties for me, that's no reason for me to be any other than generous to a great man who made a significant contribution. And I'm very glad that I am in the land of the living to say that. Now, when we have gatherings of this kind, we are required, as the theme says, and at particular moments to take a fresh guard. In our cricketing culture, among the reasons why you take a fresh guard is that you go to the wicket with a particular view of the wicket, but when you are there, it's a different wicket. You might think it only taking some bunks and you play out the morning session, but you find not only is the pace hot, first day, second day, and so forth, and even from the first day, the ball is turning viciously. And when you are going batting, you have to take an appropriate guard. And as circumstances change, you have to adapt to these circumstances. Men and women make history, but only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. And those circumstances are those which you have inherited from the past, those which have come to life while you're at the wicket, so to speak. And importantly, part of the circumstances which you meet and which are sustained and endured include accumulated ideas and beliefs from the past which weigh upon the brain of the living like a nightmare. And the purpose of the party and of leadership is to assess those extant circumstances with all the possibilities and limitations and strengths and weaknesses, and as far as is humanly practicable, to go beyond the frontiers or the boundaries of what would normally be considered possible. And I believe that everyone will agree, certainly the electorate of Barbados on the last occasion agreed, that Mayor Motley and the Barbados Labour Party have pushed the boundaries of possibilities for their country beyond that which the circumstances would normally suggest. I know that in every political party, there are individuals who do not agree with everything. But I always, at moments like this, give caution to those who may be irresponsible in breaching the unity of the party by saying one simple practical thing. If you think government is difficult, try opposition. Often that is forgotten. Which leads me to address what I consider to be 7 unities. 7, I'm a scientific person, but I always like using 7s because both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament tell me that 7 is a perfect number. What are these 7 unities? And the awardees, I'm sure, will bear them in mind. The first is unity of vision. And I will return to each, but I want to state them in summary terms so that we would begin to understand them and have them etched in our consciousness. Always remember, as I tell you, if you think government is challenging, if government is difficult, try opposition. I was in opposition from 1968 to 2001. And I could tell you, government much better than opposition. And if you don't believe that, you shouldn't be part of a serious party. Unity of vision. Unity of philosophy. Unity of policies and programs. Unity of our Caribbean civilization and in global solidarity. Unity of organization. Unity of and with the leadership of the party. And unity of the people in communion with Almighty God. 7 basic unities. And they stem from the very fundamental meaning of the word party. When you are in a party, you are part of something as distinct from something else. You can't say that you're inside of the Barbados Labour Party and you got one foot here and you want to have another foot somewhere else. That is either right-wing opportunism or, in the case of some, left-wing socialism of an extreme kind, which Lenin himself told us was an infantile disorder. If you are part of the party, you have to stay with the vision, which is people-centered. If you're part of the party, you have to be someone steeped in social democracy. That's the philosophy of the Barbados Labour Party. And depends on the circumstances. That social democracy may well be of a more advanced kind, or it may be less so, as the circumstances admit, but always nationalist and always anti-imperialist and strongly in favor of non-intervention and non-interference in your internal affairs. That's why Barrow was correct. Friends of all and satellites of none. And then you have to devise, within the framework of the vision and the philosophy, practical programs based on certain broad-based policies. And in the real world, there is never enough money to do everything that you want to do. Because very often, your aspirations may be ahead of your capacity. I, for instance, I have the aspiration, indeed I have the freedom to embark on the quest to run the 100 meters in 9.58 seconds like Usain Bolt. But I don't have the capacity. neither now or any time before. And I'm unlikely ever to attain that. And then you may fashion policies and programs, and you have to decide how you're going to sequence them. And there may be disagreement as to which one should take priority and how you do the sequencing. But that discussion, having taken place inside of the party, and it is agreed upon, it is entirely counterproductive for anybody at whatever level inside of the party to be in the public criticizing the priorities and the sequencing of them. Because when you do that, you think that you're on your own. But the reason why you have a voice is because of the party, and there's something called solidarity. And you're talking to a man who has come and who still is, and still am, in a revolutionary frame of mind. But I have to take the world as I find it. And what is important when we take the world as we find it? That each of us must count for something. We must not allow ourselves to be nothing. Because if you don't make efforts yourself to count for something and to avoid being nothing, if you don't take account of yourself to do something, you basically don't have any proper place, either inside of the party or the world, because you're just existing. But everybody has an important role to play. But you can't play it on the basis of atomized individualism. You have to do it within the context of social solidarity. And then, we are all one Caribbean. We have a shared experience, and what we have to do is to ensure that that shared experience becomes manifest as a conscious expression. And the various forms of that expression of consciousness and of constructive building, we can argue about this or that in that particular area. But we must go in quest of transforming that shared experience into conscious expression. And we have to build alliances externally. Just as Barrow said, and the formulation that I use, friends of all, we strive for a better world. Now I know what's going through your mind. How do you have such close relations, Ralph, with Cuba and Venezuela? Or Nicaragua? Or any other set of countries which the United States of America don't want me to have relations with? First of all, my situation and Barbados' situation is different from the United States. Let's take Cuba, for example. The reason why you have this absurd policy by the United States against Cuba has nothing to do with freedom or democracy or human rights or any of those things. Because when the United States talks to me about that, I said, don't bring that hypocritical talk to me. And I could point to many instances of hypocrisy. Don't come to me with that. I say, I am not allowing the foreign policy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to be determined by presidential politics, senatorial politics, congressional politics, or governor politics of South Florida. Florida is a very important state for presidential elections. After California, New York, and Texas is Florida. George Bush Jr. won the presidency at the Supreme Court because of an interpretation of pregnant chads and hanging chads in Florida. And it is because in South Florida you have such a large concentration of Cubans, added now by some Venezuelans. If that population, which is so concentrated, which makes a big difference in Florida, if those persons were spread across the whole of the United States, so they would have no heavy influence in one big area, you never would have had this problem between Cuba and the United States. It comes from politics. So I'm not allowing American presidential politics or senatorial politics to determine the foreign policy of St. Vincent. So I tell the Americans, well, on that one we have to agree to disagree. And we work on other things. Because at the end of the day, we are competitive democracies with strong institutions grounded in the freedom and dignity of man and woman. And there can be no question about those. And we score very highly in these respects globally by all objective observers. In fact, I'll tell you this. Inside of the very State Department, you have a lot of people who don't agree with what America is doing. They might come out and say something against Ralph tomorrow that is not so. But that is all right. I don't mind that. Indeed, I don't mind the criticisms at all. Properly speaking, I will tell you, over the 54 years of my political activism, I have benefited greatly from criticisms. And you can take that, the meaning of that, however you want to take it. So, once you are clear as to what you are about, and you have, it's not just simply a question of a conviction, it is that you have analyzed the problem very carefully and you have come to a sober conclusion and you can defend it. Two roads diverge in the woods, and I shall be saying it ages and ages hence. I have taken the road less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Our Caribbean civilization is being tested right at the moment in Haiti, and is a matter under which we have a lot of current discussions. CARICOM has met twice in 7 days on Haiti, 3 times, sorry, and we have met on one occasion with the Prime Minister of Canada. And when we are considering providing supports for Haiti, is for the Haitian people, not for the Haitian government. Because the Haitian government has to justify its legitimacy. And that Haitian government, which came to office by the word-of-mouth presentation of the assassinated president. Matters were not consummated. And that word-of-mouth has already expired because that term should have come to an end since February, several months ago. So there has to be a conversation between the government and the various forces, social forces in Haiti, NGOs and the like. Otherwise, what you will have is that there is support being given to a government which itself is not legitimate in the current situation. But people are suffering. There are real problems. It's a complicated issue. And that requires astute leadership. It requires fine judgment in order to arrive at, in the circumstances, what is the best possible answer. Not a perfect answer. Because what I promised the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and what I promised the people of Barbados is not perfect governance. It's good governance. I will only reach the condition, the place of good governance when I am transported to Beulah land. When I go, when I'm taken up by angels and music welcomes me into heaven, that is when I'm going to have perfect governance. In the meanwhile, I do the business of good governance. And then, leadership. Unity of leadership. I want to begin with a general proposition, because often, once you have somebody who is ensconced as leader, and they're very strong, it doesn't matter. There are always people down the line thinking that they may be the next person. But as a good Roman Catholic, not necessarily a successfully practicing one, we have two sayings in the church. At least I distill two sayings from the church in relation to leadership. Once you sing in the choir, you can be pope. So the papacy is not out of the reach of anybody who is inside of the Unity Labour Party or the Barbados Labour Party. But the ambition implicit in that proposition is restrained by a beautiful hymn which says, the good Lord shows his face on he or she who waits his or her turn. And we have to have unity with leadership. Man who used to preach that very much is His Grace the Archbishop Granville Williams. You know the song he used to sing? Mount Zion Hill. Mount Zion Hill, Mount Zion Hill, Mount Zion Hill, that is the holy hill. I'll follow the comrade footsteps Anywhere she go, I follow the comrade footstep. Anywhere she goes. Now, that Sankey speaks to the question of unity in leadership, and you have the discussions internally. And you can have your criticism and self-criticism inside. But when you come out, you're part of something, and you line up. And then, of course, unity of the people in communion with Almighty God. There are some people in the party who may not believe in God. The fact of the matter, though, is that overwhelmingly most people do. And the party accepts, just like mine, that we reaffirm daily that our nation is founded on the belief in the supremacy of God and the freedom and dignity of man and woman. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Dr. Hines opening us with prayer tonight, and we all believe that. At least overwhelmingly we believe that. And that is part of our Judeo-Christian civilization. Now, we have gone through 2.5 difficult years. COVID. We are in 2022, but people forget that in 2020, other than Guyana, which has newfound oil wealth, every other Caribbean country had negative economic growth. From the lowest was St. Vincent and Grenadines, 5.3%. St. Lucia was about 25%. Barbados was somewhere in the early double digits, 10, 11, 14. That's a big hole. We were here minding our business. And the next thing we know, in March, COVID came to us from Wuhan. And we had to deal with the problem. There are some people today who have amnesia about that, you know. When you're 14% in the hole, you have to climb out of that, you know. It's going to take Barbados a good 3 years before it reaches back to the level of the GDP of 2019. That's part of the reality which we face. But you have some commentators who just ignore all of this. It's because it has receded, they forget what the damage it has done. And in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in April 2021, I had 32 volcanic eruptions. And you suffered here too. Then, on the 2nd of July, I had Hurricane Elsa last year. And later in the year, small drought. And on February the 24th, as a consequence of the war in Ukraine, rising prices, dislocations all over the world. And all of this was on top of problems which you had on the fiscal side in this country, prompting me to go to the IMF. They call the IMF the banking institution of last resort. They call it this for nothing, you know, it's not first resort. If she could have gone somewhere else, she would have gone somewhere else. Men and women make history, but only to the extent of that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. And those circumstances are what you inherit and what have come upon you. But what a leader has to do with his or her people is to extend as far as is practicable the boundaries of the possibilities which the circumstances permit you. Otherwise, you're in the sky. Your feet are not grounded. And ordinary people understand this. What you do have, amidst all these difficulties, there are complaints galore. There has grown up a complaining industry. And everybody, however uninitiated they may be, once they have a laptop or a cell phone, an iPhone, their complaints are magnified globally. But it doesn't matter how many times a wrong complaint is made, it isn't made right by repetition. If it is wrong and if it is a lie, it doesn't matter how many times it's repeated. And that is part of the purpose of the party, to correct those lies and to correct those misrepresentations. You can't sit down and just leave it to the elected representatives. And I'll tell you this, certainly in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have, I call them the internet crazies. And there are a lot of them, including many who overseas. They want to be transformed from an internet crazy to your excellency. It's a lot of personal ambition. The number of them who want to be consul general, an ambassador at the United Nations, they're lining up at the trough. They would know in their heart that Ralph is doing well, that Mia is doing well. But that is not the business of the internet crazies. They have an ambition. Well, I don't know. They get so disappointed because there's so many of them who want the same set of job that they'll be fighting one another for them. And that's why I said to you at the beginning, if you think government is a problem, try opposition. I want that to resonate in your head, you know. And you know the developmental path on which you are. So we are in this situation. We have to build back better and stronger. You can look up this word on your cell phone. Respire, R-E-S-P-I-R. I just published a book, Johnny, called A Time of Respire. Beyond COVID, volcanic eruptions, Hurricane Elsa, and global turmoil. Fresh hope for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Respire means fresh hope. It has been in disuse since the 16th century, this word. But it's a beautiful word. Fresh hope after period of extreme convulsions and dislocations, or even despair. But you cannot lose hope. And the hope is greater than in normal times. It has to be because of the challenges which we are facing. And that hope is conjoined with faith. But faith has to be made manifest in works. Without works, the faith is dead. And that is linked inevitably with love. Love for one another. Love for your party. Love for your country. And love is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. The Barbados Labour Party doesn't have any apology to make for winning 30 seats back to back. You don't have any apology to make for that? That's the verdict of the people. And Barbados is a country "250 years close to that removed from slavery. And they are in the very high level of Human Development Index by the United Nations Development Program. I wrote, and I'm sure many of you would have read it, something called The Idea of Barbados. It's an essay in 2014 which I wrote personally for my friend Frondel. Yes, Frondel is my friend. And I wrote also a letter to my dear Mia. Frondel is my friend. And this young lady is my dear Mia. And I want to read one thing. I see a very popular figure has come in. In writing about the idea of Barbados, I said I make bold to say that other CARICOM member states aspire to be in an idea, because Barbados is not only a country, it's an idea. But none has quite achieved that status. Jamaica is a brand, but not an idea. Rastafarianism, Bob Marley, Usain Bolt, and sandals have helped to shape the Jamaican brand, a marketing tool to attract visitors. But it is not a transcendental idea which infuses the body politic and society to consolidate progressive achievements nationally. Trinidad is an incomplete national formation with immense possibilities, but constrained by a bundle of limitations, including rising lawlessness. Guyana's natural condition is still untamed, but a nation which possesses enormous potential. The member states of the OECS, in one way or another, consciously or unconsciously aspire to the Barbados model of a maturing social democracy. Successful British colonies, such as Bermuda and the British Virgin Islands, are in many ways artificial societies. The French overseas territories of Martinique and Guadeloupe are subsidized enclaves in the region in search of a Caribbean identity. Puerto Rico is a Caribbean outpost of the American Empire, a confused and inchoate territory with an ill-defined future. But Barbados is an idea. And it is an idea which is difficult to put your hand on completely. And I try to find this. Don't sell yourself short. You are not better than anybody, and nobody is better than you. You have a great future within the context of your own achievements, with your vision, your philosophy, your policies and programs, the unity of your organization, unity with the leadership, a communion with the people, and Almighty God. And that national thrust within the context of our Caribbean civilization and our global solidarity. You and other Caribbean countries, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, will respond in this profoundly existential manner. We may do it in some different ways. And you gather tonight for your award ceremony. You gather also to commemorate and to celebrate. There are persons who will come to you and preach political purity to you. Keep your Bajan common sense grounded in you. Purity? Have you ever had pure water? Water composed only of hydrogen and oxygen. Without, in the practical world, the bird's small excrement. Huh? Or you can go in the laboratory and get pure water. You have the purity of priests who beat their chests and say, I'm pure, 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 pure. In short, the purity of those who are so pure that they do not know the real world of impurity. We are on the right track. I'm happy to be here with you tonight to celebrate. Know that I love you very much. And though my years are coming to a close, I still have a lot of juice left in me. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
You may be seated, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I would like to invite to make a presentation of a token of appreciation to our guest speaker by Comrade the Honorable Kay McConney, MP. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Comrade McConney as she makes a very special presentation to our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonsalves.
On behalf of the Barbados Labour Party, our chairperson, the entire executive, and all of your comrades here, I wish to give you this token of appreciation. It is a piece of Barbados, made of something that is natural and spectacular and enduring, just like you. We want to thank you. Yes.
It's good to hear that I'm enduring. I hope Eloise is listening.
Well, thank you very much. We want to thank you for the stories of connection through labor that binds the Unity Labour Party to the Barbados Labour Party. We want to thank you for the 7 unities that you shared with us that allow us to keep politics human. We want to thank you for showing us how leadership at this time is about pushing the boundaries of possibility. And we want to thank you that as we take fresh guard, we do so with respect. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please another round of applause for our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. the Honorable Ralph E. Gonsalves. We're going to be moving into the presentation of awards.